Today's story is about a mysterious disappearance that shook both the lives of those involved and the public. A man presumed dead for nearly a decade, only to resurface with no memory of his past. This is the story of Lawrence Bader, a man who vanished from Lake Erie, leaving behind questions that remain unanswered to this day. Join us as we dive into the strange case of a man with two names, a missing past, and the families left to piece together the truth. Chapter 1: The Vanishing. The wind off Lake Erie was cold that day, colder than it should have been, especially for late May. The waves were restless, crashing hard against the shore like something was brewing beneath them. And overhead, the sky sagged low, thick and gray, heavy with the promise of a storm. At the marina in Rocky River, Ohio, a few locals stood around, jackets pulled tight, eyes following a man stepping into a small 14-foot boat, alone, heading straight out into the churning water. His name? Lawrence Joseph Bader, a cookware salesman from Akron, tall, clean-cut, always smiling. The kind of guy who could light up a room with a joke or charm his way into a sale. People liked him, but lately he hadn't been doing so well. Behind the grin, things were falling apart. He was 30, married to a woman named Mary Lou, father of 3 kids with a 4th on the way, and broke. Thousands owed to the IRS, bills stacked high. His job selling pots and pans door to door wasn't cutting it. And so on a Friday afternoon, May 15, 1957, he told Mary Lou he just needed a little break, said he was going fishing, said he'd be back tomorrow. She watched him leave. At the marina, Bader rented the boat under his real name, paid a small deposit, left his car parked nearby. Fishing gear was still in the back seat, untouched, which was weird. Weirder still, he didn't bring any tackle on the boat, told the staff he was going fishing, but left everything behind. Out on the lake, the wind picked up, fast. The water turned violent. By nightfall, the storm was in full swing. The next day, they found the boat, empty, battered, banging against the rocks, the propeller wrecked. One oar floated nearby, but no sign of Bader. The Coast Guard searched. Boats swept the lake. Helicopters scanned the shoreline. Divers went into the water. Nothing. His body was never found. Mary Lou was devastated. The kids were too little to understand what was happening. The community hoped, at first. But after 5 years, that hope faded. Lawrence Bader was declared legally dead. A young widow mourned. A family moved forward. And the lake, it kept its silence. By all accounts, that should have been the end of the story. But then, 800 miles away in Omaha, Nebraska, a man with one eye and no past was starting over. New name, new life, but his face, exactly the same. Chapter 2: The Man Called John. He showed up in Omaha like a gust of wind, loud, colorful, unforgettable. He called himself John Fritz Johnson, a name that sounded easygoing, like someone who always had a good story and never ran out of charm. And he did. Fritz didn't have much of a past, or at least not one he shared, but he had presence. People noticed him, people liked him. He told jokes, did magic tricks at the bar, made friends out of strangers like it was nothing. He could walk into a room and 5 minutes later own it. Said he'd served in the Navy, said he'd worked in broadcasting, but whenever the questions got too close, too specific, he'd just laugh. Long story, he'd say. Maybe I'll tell you one day. He never did. By the early 1960s, Fritz Johnson wasn't just a name, he was a local celebrity. He landed a job as a TV announcer and sportscaster for KETV Channel 7. Later, he became an MC for public events, the guy with the booming voice, the quick wit, the easy smile. He was animated, theatrical, restless, the kind of person who looked like he was always on his way to something bigger. And maybe most striking of all, he had only one eye. Doctors said it was cancer, a tumor that took the eye shortly after he arrived in Omaha. He wore a black eye patch, made it part of his image. It didn't make him self-conscious. It made him cool, dashing, a little dangerous. If anyone thought it strange that a man with no clear history just happened to show up right before a medical crisis, they didn't say it out loud. In 1961, 4 years after Lawrence Bader vanished on Lake Erie, Fritz married a woman named Nancy Zimmer. She had a daughter from a previous marriage. He adopted her, and they later had a child together. By all accounts, he was a devoted father, a loving husband, a man at the center of every room he walked into. Back in Akron, Mary Lou Bader had done the only thing she could: survive. She'd raised 4 children alone, mourned her husband, tried to rebuild a life shattered by loss. And then, 1965, a traveling archery show came to Chicago. Just another exhibition, just another event. Except this one featured a performer named Fritz Johnson. He'd become known for his archery skills, performing at tournaments, sports expos, live shows. He was good. But someone in the crowd froze. "I think that's Larry Bader," they whispered. The tip spread fast. Back to Ohio, back to the Bader family, and eventually to John Bader, Lawrence's nephew. He worked security, booked a flight to Chicago, went to see for himself. He stepped into the venue, saw the man with the patch, smiling, laughing, performing. He stopped cold. "That's my uncle," he said. And just like that, the man they thought was dead. Ghosts of Akron. The phone calls started before the arrows were even packed away. By the time Fritz Johnson left the stage in Chicago, word was already spreading. Reporters were dialing. Police were asking questions. Family members were falling silent, stunned. Back in Akron, Ohio, Mary Lou Bader had no idea what was coming. One day she was a widow, a mother of 4 who had spent nearly a decade rebuilding her life after losing her husband in a boating accident. The next, people were telling her he was alive, living in Omaha, under a different name, with a new wife, a new life, smiling on television. Authorities moved quickly. Fingerprints were pulled. Old documents reviewed. Fritz's Navy record? Vague, inconsistent. But the prints from Lawrence Joseph Bader, on file from his time in the military and a brief job selling cookware, told a different story. They matched. Exactly. There was no doubt anymore. Was Lawrence Bader? When confronted, Fritz didn't run. He looked surprised, maybe even genuinely confused. "I don't know who this Lawrence Bader is," he told reporters. "But if that's me, I've never heard of him until now." He said he had no memory of any life before Omaha. Nothing of Mary Lou, nothing of Akron, nothing of 4 children left behind. He remembered only the last 9 years. Everything before that, gone. He told them he'd woken up in a new city, no name, no past. So he made one. He said he built a life, made friends, fell in love. If he had another life, he didn't know it. But not everyone believed him. Mary Lou was shaken. She watched the man on TV, the man with the patch. She heard his voice, saw his smile, the way he rubbed his jaw when he was thinking. "It was Larry," his siblings agreed. His brother came forward. "There's no mistake," he said. "That's my brother." Still, Fritz held to his confusion. He underwent psychiatric evaluation. No signs of trauma, no signs of mental illness. Some doctors floated the idea of dissociative amnesia, a rare condition. Others weren't so sure. After all, this wasn't just memory loss. This was a man who had created an entirely new identity, full of confidence, charisma, and flair. A man who wore his new name like a perfectly tailored suit. When asked about the boating trip, the day he vanished, he simply blinked. "I don't know anything about it," he said. "I've never even been to Lake Erie." But the details didn't lie. He disappeared just as debt collectors were closing in. He'd recently taken out a large insurance policy. The boat he rented never returned. His body never found. Some began to whisper that he faked it all, staged a vanishing act, slipped out of one life and into another. Maybe it wasn't amnesia, maybe it was escape. Now the question wasn't just, is he Lawrence Bader? The question was, what happens now? 2 wives, 2 homes, 4 children in Ohio, 2 more in Nebraska, 2 lives on a collision course, and 1 man at the center with 1 eye and no past. Chapter 4, The Man with 2 Names, or so he claimed. The fallout was as strange as the story itself. The press latched onto it like wildfire. Fritz Johnson's half-grinning face was everywhere. A dead man, apparently alive. Some called it a miracle, others a con. And somewhere in between all that noise were real people trying to make sense of it. In Akron, Mary Lou Bader was stuck between labels: wife, widow. Her husband, missing nearly a decade, had been found, but he didn't remember her, didn't come home, didn't even seem like the man she once loved. And what do you do with that? What do you call that? Meanwhile, in Omaha, Nancy, the woman who'd known him only as Fritz, had to reckon with the truth. The man she built a life with was already married. Their vows, their children, their memories, suddenly called into question, not just by the law, but by reality itself. And the law? It fumbled too. Was this bigamy? Insurance fraud? Identity theft? But the facts wouldn't hold still. Fritz hadn't used a fake name for crime. He didn't cash in on insurance. He hadn't run from the spotlight. In fact, he leaned into it. Loud, outgoing, present. And through it all, he kept saying the same thing. I've never been anyone but Fritz Johnson. Eventually, a court confirmed that biologically, legally, he was Lawrence Joseph Bader. But that didn't settle anything. Psychiatrists debated. Family members searched for answers. But before anything definitive could be known, time ran out. In 1966, just a few years after the story broke, Lawrence, or Fritz, died of cancer. The same disease that had taken his eye, the one that pushed him into his life in TV. He was just 39. And when he passed, he took more questions with him than he ever answered. He never admitted to faking his disappearance. He never explained how he got from Lake Erie to Nebraska. He never, not once, claimed to be anyone but Fritz, even when shown otherwise. The aftermath. 2 families, 1 mystery. Mary Lou never got full closure. Her husband was found and then lost again in the very same moment. Whether it was by choice or by mind, she never got him back. Nancy, too, had to accept a cruel twist. The man she'd built a life with had a past he never told her about, or perhaps had never known himself. And the 6 children between both families carried the weight of a legacy neither simple nor fair. Some stayed quiet. Some spoke out. But all of them were shaped by a man split in 2, a man who left and a man who arrived. Final reflection. A man, a vanishing, a divide. So who was he? A man who cracked under pressure and vanished into a new identity? A man overtaken by some rare psychological break, who forgot everything and started over? Or both? The evidence doesn't settle the matter. It stretches in both directions. The amnesia theory has its appeal, the shift in personality, the new habits, the lack of memory. But if it was amnesia, why didn't he reach out when confronted with his past? Why didn't he want to know who he'd once been? The escape theory feels colder, but makes a certain kind of sense. Lawrence was drowning in debt. His marriage was faltering. His world was cracking. Maybe this was his way out, a clean break, a new name, a second chance. Those who knew him before say he left, intentionally. Those who met him after say he was someone entirely new. And in between them, a gulf no one could cross. So maybe the truth isn't one theory or the other. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe he didn't just lose himself in the water that day. Maybe he was already fading long before he ever disappeared. What would you do if your past became a prison? Would you try to escape it? Would you forget it? Would you reinvent yourself completely? Some questions don't have answers. Some people don't leave trails. And some mysteries remain exactly that. He was Lawrence Joseph Bader. He was Fritz Johnson. He was perhaps neither, or both. And in the end, the man with 2 names took the truth to his grave. Rest in peace, Lawrence Joseph Bader. This story is real, and it's tragic. Real people were affected, and families were changed forever. Once again, thank you for listening. If you found this story compelling, it would mean a lot if you subscribed or followed the channel. It really helps us keep telling stories that matter. And hey, if you have a story of your own, let us know in the comments. You might even get the chance to be featured in a future video. Thanks again for your time. Take care. Subscribe to Tales Around the Flame.